Well, Norman Foss and I were going to enlist. I was working in Ohio. I was working as a welder in Ohio, and Norman had a low draft number and I had a high draft number. But his draft number was coming up, so he wanted to enlist, because if you enlisted, you got what you enlisted for. Otherwise, if you got drafted, you'd probably get the infantry, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so he'd been talking to a guy, or we had been, to a World War I vet, and he said, enlist in ordnance, he said. There's only one guy that died in World War I in ordnance, and he fell off a bar stool and broke his neck, he said. I thought, well, that sounds pretty good, So we went on and enlisted, and when I had my physical, Dr. Skemp in La Crosse said, no, I can't take you, you got a murmur in your heart. Well, gee, that kind of scared me too. Anyway, they took Norman, so Norman went, and I went home again and worked in a restaurant until my pre-induction physical. And when I had my pre-induction physical, the doctors there said, yeah, I had a murmur in my heart, all right, but if there wasn't anything worse wrong with me than that, I'd live to be an old man, so I guess they were right. So I was inducted. A group of guys from Houston County and guys from Filmer County, and they inducted us at Fort Des Moines because Fort Snelling was quarantined from some kind of disease. So we had to go all the way to Des Moines, and some of these guys from Filmer County had bottles with them, beer and stuff, and by the time we got to Des Moines, some of them were pretty well cracked, and every time we went around the corner with a bus, the bottles would roll in the pile. Oh gosh. And I remember one of them was, well, we pulled up to a place and it said, on the door it said orderly room, and I thought, orderly room? The only orderly I ever heard of was a guy that emptied bedpans in the hospital. I thought, well, what's this got to do with us? Are you going to take us in the hospital? Well, the orderly room is the office, They put me to washing cars and stuff like that. The rest of the guys shipped out. Most of them went to Vancouver, Washington, I heard, to the infantry, and they kept me there. Finally, we got our uniforms and stuff, and finally they called me out, and they took me to the railroad station. I got in the railroad car, and I asked if anybody from Spring Grove was there, and if they were all from Iowa. They all seemed to be from Iowa. Well, Tootie Dubs from Rushford was on the other end of the car, and I said, is there anybody from Minnesota here? And he said, yeah, I am. So we got together, and he was a real nice guy. We went through basic training together. We hated basic training. It was rough, We were sleeping in tents, and it was cold, and they had little coke stoves in the middle of the tent, and you'd fill it up at night before you went to bed, and by 2 o'clock in the morning, the coal was burned out and it was colder than heck. And anyway, we were ready to graduate from basic training. We didn't know where we'd be sent, but we were due to get out of there pretty soon. They marched us up on the drill field, and the head drill instructor took over and had us at attention. We were stopped at attention, so there was no preparatory command. And he got up behind us and he said, "Right face," and everybody turned right except me. He came through the ranks there with a 30-inch stick out. That better not catch anybody either. And got right up to me and he put his nose pretty near against mine and he said, "How long have you been taking basic training, Mike?" He said. I mumbled something. He said, "How'd you like to take it over again?" And I said, "Oh gosh, no, I really wouldn't." And he said, "Well, you make another mistake like that and I'll see that you take it over again." And he jerked my hat down over my eyes and dropped off. And another thing that happened in basic training, they called out my name, several guys, and took us up on the post and said we had to give us a certain territory that we had to watch. They gave you a rifle and told you how to use it, and they told you that if somebody came where they weren't supposed to, you're supposed to holler, "Halt!" And if they didn't halt, you're supposed to holler, "Halt" again. If they didn't halt, then you'd shoot to kill. And of course, I think that was maybe it was to shoot the warning first. But anyway, the final, if they didn't obey your orders, well, you're supposed to shoot them. Well, they gave me a beat. They had a building out in the wilderness on the post there that they had some parties in the summertime, I guess. And my duty was to walk around that post, that building, and see that nobody broke in there, because they had beer and stuff in there. And I thought, gee, I hope that and they told me that if anybody came, I had to challenge them, Well, I thought, God, I hope nobody comes. And pretty soon a Jeep came and I got out there and hollered halt. And it was an officer of the day, and he was a captain. Of course, I didn't know a captain from a private in those days. And he's asked my general orders, and I told him, and he said, "Okay, you're doing all right." And then he said, "Now you're supposed to salute me when I leave." Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Oh, he was a pretty good guy. Well, we had 2 hours off, 2 hours on and 2 hours off, I think, around the clock for 24 hours there. And the only place that you could rest when you were off was in the guardhouse, or on some dirty old mattresses that the prisoners had, so that they didn't get any sleep at all. Next morning, we were told that we could go home back to our camp and go to bed because we had been up all night. Well, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they blew a bugle and said, "Everybody out, everybody out." Well, what's going on now? Well, Martha Ray is in town, and we're going to have a full dress parade for her. And I said, well, I worked all night, I was on guard duty, so I don't have to go. Yes, you have to go, everybody has to go. So I had to get up and put on my uniform and stand out there. I was just all in. I got back, and my name was on the bulletin board for KP duty the next morning. Oh, gee. So I complained to the guy that gave out the work detail, and I told him that I'd been on KP or guard duty, and now they was supposed to go to KP at 4 o'clock in the morning. And he said, well, that's my mistake. He said, you shouldn't have been on this list, but he said, it's too late for me to change it now. You'll have to go on KP, but he said, if you do, I'm going to see that you don't have to pull any other details as long as I was here, which he did too. I remember KP duty though, walked in there and we were going to serve fish that night, and they had tables like those about 6 or 8 inch, 8-foot tables, you know, all over the place on there, that deep with fish. I thought there weren't that many fish in the world, but they served 10,000 men at that thing. So I thought, gee, I can't believe it. There could be that that amount of fish. But all I had to do was take one fish, dip it in batter, put it in cracker crumbs, and put them on a tray. All day until 10,000 guys were served. Of course, there were several guys doing it. But got through basic training and got on a train, and it took us from St. Louis to San Antonio, Texas. And we didn't know where we were going then either, of course, but we got out there in the morning and I said, well, you're in the Air Force. And we came out and they said, you're in the 13th Air Depot Group. And this commanding officer said, where did you come from? We said, Jefferson Barracks. Oh, well, you're going to like it here then, he said. Jefferson Barracks had a reputation of being a tough basic training camp. And that night for supper we had the best meal I'd ever had in service. We had 2 kinds of meat, I believe, and everything. And we had nice tents. Everything looked rosy. And then we did some training there too, and they said put me on a train again. Went back to St. Louis again to school, to Robertson Aviation at the airport in St. Louis. Robertson was Colonel Robertson was a good friend of Lindbergh's, and this is where Colonel Lindbergh hung out when, he had a plane named the Spirit of St. Louis, and so this Robertson Aviation started a school there for mechanics. I went to school there, and my 2 sisters, Julia and Dory, came down to visit me there. And when we were in formation, I looked out of the corner of my eye and I saw him. It came out there to visit me, out to Anyway, we went to St. Louis and got them registered in the hotel, and I came to the hotel to visit them that night. And they were both exhausted from their trip down, and I was so eager to talk to them. I guess I talked them to death. Anyway, I got to see them. Then I went back to San Antonio after that school was over. And by the way, I got a diploma or a citation for being one of the honor students. There's three of us that are tied for top. I guess I didn't designate who was 1, 2, or 3, but got a special handshake from the commanding officer and everything. And sent us back to San Antonio, and by that time the 13th had shipped out. So we were a man without a country. We belonged to the 13th, and when you belong to somebody, you feel, that you've got some stature. Then you aren't just a hobo. So we were interviewed by the commanding officer of the 15th, and he said, that's a remarkable record there. And I thought, well, this is my chance now. I said, yes, sir. I realized I got an advantage that probably everybody didn't get, and I tried to make the most of it. And he turned to his lieutenant and he said, "You hear that, Lieutenant? This is the kind of guys we want in our outfit." And I said, "How about a furlough?" No. He said, "Wait a minute. I want you to go to advanced school. And I'm making you a corporal too," which I didn't get either one of them. But I did get to school. Went to Dallas to Braniff Airlines at the airport in Dallas, and we lived at the YMCA, and oh boy, we really had it made there. We got breakfast and supper at the Y, and they had taken over a ballroom in the Y there, and they had that was our quarters for our bed in the morning.